Because the earth element is about digestion. So in Taoist and Chinese medicine, we're working with the spleen, the stomach, the pancreas, the entire, the duodenum, the jejunum, the whole digestive system. And if a cup is always full, like in the story, full of opinions and reactions and stimulation and unresolved experiences, undigested experiences, unassimilated trauma, then nothing can integrate. We're too full. And, I've had this lesson given to me in a lot of different ways from different teachers because I spent a lot of time in my intellect of getting hit with the Zen stick, the metaphorical Zen stick, and then sometimes the literal Zen stick, of being too full. There's nowhere to put wisdom. There's no porousness into which a new insight can flow. And this is really important in modern culture because we are so full of constant stimulation. There's not much room for deep experience. Um, I was talking the other day about a term from a guy, Byung-Chul Han, who's a social philosopher who wrote a book called The Disappearance of Ritual, and he calls it the terror of short-termism. So this is bite-sized dopamine-based reality where we don't have deep temporal connection. We don't have, it's a burnout society, and it undermines our capacity for deep attention. And this is so important. I think this is why tea and meditation are essential medicine these days. So if we think about the earth element and soil in the same way that we do about the psyche, if soil is packed too tight, if the rows, nothing can grow. If it's flooded, then the seeds will rot. If it's depleted, it becomes thin and brittle. So healthy earth, if you've ever had a garden at home or done some farming and you reach down into healthy earth, first of all, you notice it's just teeming with life, worms and bugs and microbes and all sorts of things. But also, there's a sweetness to it. Like if you pick it up, it's loamy and it's rich and it's alive. And there's a harmonious balance of all of this life. And it's also very porous, right? It's there's a quality to healthy soil. Um, it receives, it breaks down what has been before it, right? In fertilizer or gold dirt, as my mom used to call it. And it transforms decay into nourishment. This is true in human relationships as well. So we have to have space in human relationship for the things that are difficult, for decay, for tension, for challenge. It needs space to become fodder for growth. But if it doesn't have the space for that, then there's nowhere to integrate. So when we move too quickly in human relationship from conflict to solution, from intimacy to distraction, from insight to the next goal or to always planning what's next. We never metabolize what happened before. And the emotion that most affects the earth element and really weakens our digestive process is worry. And worry is undigested experience. It's when the earth element is imbalanced, it's the way the earth element thinks and it appears like thinking. But what is worry, right? If you think about you worry about something, you're ruminating and you're just on a loop. It's like a thought that keeps coming around and around and around without evolving, without any plan, without any insight, without resolution. And it's usually around something that we can't do anything about. So, I often say, if you don't believe that you're crazy, then like start a strong meditation practice because you start to see you're just thinking the same nonsense, right? You're just on loops. And those loops keep the ego in the driver's seat. But when we actually integrate our experiences, that becomes wisdom and integrity. And as I've said, I think in every class, this five element work is really the science and art of integrity, of cultivating zhongqi and also uprightness, integrity, so that our thoughts, words, and actions are aligned, so that we live according to clear values. So the virtue of the earth element is something called Xin, which is integrity and trustworthiness. And that comes from that trustworthiness and that integrity comes from digestion. Um, so when you've integrated your lessons and had insights, and then you live according to those insights. So you have insights about yourself or about how you wish to live your life or your relationships. And then you live in accordance with those insights. That's living with integrity. And integrity is what anchors us to the earth. When somebody doesn't have integrity, you can feel it in them, but you can also, there's a flimsiness. You could push them over. The wind could blow them over. Am I this way or am I that way? Do I believe this or do I believe that? Do I value this? Do I value that? There's not that sense of I know who I am and I live from that center and from that integrity. When you connect with somebody with integrity, you can feel the gravitas. There's a groundedness about them, right? So in terms of the other elements, when you have integrity and trustworthiness in the earth element, boundaries in the metal element become healthy. Growth in the wood becomes supported from the earth, right? Wood grows out of the earth. The passion of fire becomes grounded. It's not impulsive, right? It's warm. There's a warmth in fire instead of a blazing conflagration, right? In fear, in water becomes contained because the earth can hold the fear in water. So, some questions to ask yourself. Where in my life am I overflowing? Where have I not made space to digest? I'm going to talk about this a little more in a minute. What would it feel like to let life compost instead of constantly moving forward? So, earth types, and you probably know somebody like this, they're not dramatic. They're not loud or urgent. They're grounded. I was just thinking about this guy named Bodhi a couple days ago, and I was like, he's a total earth type because he's very like there's a solidness, there's a stability to earth people, and there's a friendliness, there's a caretaking. It's the quiet center that allows the other elements to function. So in the five element wheel in Taoism, the earth is the center. Without a healthy earth, everything gets out of balance. Without earth, nothing can stabilize. The other elements can't stabilize. The earth is the center of the axis, right? So in our culture, because we have such a wood and fire culture in North America, um, we don't really value the quiet integration periods. And in the Taoist calendar, there's 2 to 3 weeks in between each season in each element where yin and yang are in transition. And it's during this time that the earth element returns yin and yang to center before the next expression. So if you start working with the five elements in this way consciously every season, it's really important at the end of the season to take a period to really reflect back on what's happened over the last 3 months or 2.5 months. What am I integrating? What lessons are present? Um, and really working with the earth element to digest and integrate and assimilate um, and create fertilizer out of the difficult experiences. This period of integration, which is the one that everybody seems to skip over, and I think it's the most important, is so central to five element work. And like right now, we're really in the earth element period. So reflecting on the water element and fear and what you've integrated from the winter. Um, in the Seasonal Tea Club, I did a whole write-up on this transition from water to wood. And so if you want, or you can go on Living Tea's blog, I've written a ton on this topic, but really working with integrating lessons from the winter before moving into that wood energy of spring. This is particularly important as we go into the fire horse energy because things are about to get real spicy. So you want to reflect on what you're shedding, what you're letting go of, and what you're not carrying into the next cycle in a couple of days, right? Okay. What are we doing on time? Good. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more directly and specifically about Earth in the context of relationship, because that's what this course is about. So the Earth element in nature is the end of those seasons, but it also represents the end of summer when, fruit is heavy on the trees, when all the leaves in the plant kingdom are starting to get lazy, but they haven't turned to decay. It's not like autumn yet. It's when everything's relaxed and everything is sort of just it's this in-between period of feeling loose and like satiated and full. It's kind of like that period right before the harvest. The harvest can be an intensive time in agriculture, but before the harvest, there's a period of rest and a sense of fullness and contentment and reciprocity and sharing. And it doesn't have that same energy of fire, which is about connection. It's more like relaxed. It's just those long, lazy days at the end of the summer. That is the quality of the earth element. And an earth element person, they tend to be sweet. The flavor of earth is sweet. They're sweet people. They're easy to get along with. They're kind of like, they're just easygoing, right? They tend to love food. They tend to love comfort. They tend to be the person in the kitchen, always making sure everybody's fed and taken care of. They're kind of like the caretakers, right? And when the earth element isn't healthy in a person, like it doesn't have the boundaries of, say, metal or some of the other elements aren't in balance, they can over caretake and overextend themselves and over function, and they can give too much. And that can come out as like anxious giving, or it can come out as worry, as pensiveness. Am I doing enough? And oftentimes, earth types will neglect their own well-being, trying to take care of everybody else. When you see an earth personality type, they're usually heavy set people. They're usually like very grounded, very earthy. They can move kind of slow. They're quick to laugh, but it's not like a manic laughter. It's a deep chuckle kind of. They're just jolly people. The hobbits are very earthy people. They literally live in the earth, right? And earth and soil receives and transforms. So its composting becomes fertility. It represents the valley that gathers water and the ripeness of the harvest. It receives, breaks down, and integrates, right? So this gives you a little bit of a sense of an earth type in a relationship. Um, when earth is healthy in a person, in a relationship, there's secure attachment, there is emotional availability, and there's stability. There's a sense of groundedness. There's not urgency. There's not worry, right? It's just solid. There's solid relationships. When they're imbalanced, like I was saying, that overgiving, that worrying, it can become anxious, over functioning, or the term is merged with others' needs, right? Like a person doesn't know their own needs and honor them. They're always tending to other people's needs or to their partner's needs. So the gift of Earth is making people feel safe, fed, held, and not alone. So if you have like an Earth friend or an Earth partner, you can just feel their presence. They're just solid. They're reliable, they're trustworthy, they're accountable. And that kind of solidity and groundedness might not be very exciting on the surface, but it's so much more important in the long term, right? So, I've got like tons of wood and fire energy. And so cultivating earth is so important and helpful for me so that there's not the sense of like urgency and intensity and like, where are we going? What are we doing? Like having a plan. Um, so, knowing what are our dominant elements helps us understand where we can start to integrate more earth qualities or more metal or more water or whatever we need more of. And with earth, like having eating at the same times, going to bed and waking up at the same times, having consistent routine, having grounding practices, eating foods like grains and heavier foods, oils and foods that are grounding and not just living on like a fruitarian diet or something. Things that are grounding in the body. I have found personally mindfulness-based movement, so Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, but also weight-bearing exercises because the muscles and the formation of the muscles is from the spleen chi. It's from the chi and the energy of the earth system that we develop and cultivate muscles, right? So I've noticed, if people have really a compromised digestive system, they have a hard time putting on any muscle mass, you know? And that muscle mass is heavy, right? Muscles are heavy. So that's part of the grounding energy. So earth types value stability, they value reciprocity, emotional safety, sharing, like giving and receiving, altruism, reciprocity are very important. And they also value being needed. Earth types want to feel needed. They want to feel like they are bringing value to your life. They're caretakers, right? They're the earth mama in the kitchen. Um, the way that they give love is through caretaking, remembering details, practical support, and then that physical warmth and friendliness, right? That's how they give love. The way they communicate it is, I'm here. You're not alone, right? They're just the steady, stable presence. The way they receive love is through consistency and reassurance, through reliability and appreciation. Earth types really love for when they give, because they love to give, having a sense of appreciation. They love touch, physicality, because the earth is physical, but it's not necessarily passionate. It's more like steady touch or like consistent touch or supportive touch, right? Big, grand gestures without steadiness are not nourishing to the earth. They don't like things that are loud and big. Again, like it's kind of a silly analogy, but hobbits are very earth type. So you imagine how would a hobbit give and receive love? Like that's kind of how earth types are. Um, so the shadow of earth is worry. Worry that turns into rumination, not integrating and digesting experience, just staying in these loops of worry. And another one is their care comes across as control. So the analogy or the thought I had was like, remember Kathy Bates in that movie, Misery? That's like a um, psychotic form of earth element. I don't know if you've seen this movie, Misery. I think it came out in the 90s. But she is coming across as this really friendly, helpful caretaker, but it's all about control, right? So unhealthy shadow earth is care. It comes across as care, but it's really actually controlling. Or support that's enabling. So you see this sometimes with like people struggling with addiction, their family members, out of love and care for them, they won't cut them off, or they'll create conditions that actually enable the addiction. This would be like an earth type that is the shadow is more present, right? They're enablers. Um, they don't draw clear lines. They don't have healthy metal or wood energy to either make a plan or cut people off and have boundaries. And then the last kind of shadow of the earth is overgiving that leads to quiet resentment. So, somebody who gives and gives and gives, but they're actually kind of resentful because they're giving because they want acknowledgement and care and love and affection. So their giving isn't coming from healthy earth, which naturally is abundant and wants to give. It's giving because you want something in return, right? And that's not real, that's controlling giving, and it's different. So again, in the five phases, and this is a bit how Earth relates to the other elements. If the Earth is the center axis, it nourishes metal by giving it structure. It contains water and or fear in the water by also giving it a container. It nourishes the growth of wood, if you think about the plant kingdom, and it cools the intensity of fire. So earth types are really good for fire people, right? They help them feel grounded. They help them feel there's the warmth that fires need, but there's also the groundedness, which helps contain all the desire and intensity of the fire. So earth is the digestive force of the psyche. It's our ability to digest our experiences. We don't only digest food, we also digest experience. Because you remember at the beginning of the meditation, we spent a moment with the senses. Everything we take in through our senses is food. And it feeds the emotional body, it feeds the physical body, and it feeds the intellectual body. And it feeds the higher bodies as well. So when we are taking in impressions and we're taking in emanations through the senses, that is all a form of nourishment. And if we don't have a healthy earth element, we take in all of that food and it just creates stagnation in the psychic digestive system. So meditation, for example, is a form of connecting with the space of emptiness that allows for digestion. It's the rest and digest of the psyche. Meditation is the rest and digest of the psyche. I'm gonna write that down and think about it later. Um, so without earth at the center, the other elements lose balance. I had one teacher, this incredible woman, Kiko Matsumoto, who's a Chinese medicine doctor in Boston. And she said, unless a person's earth element is strong, they're a walking zombie. And she was really adamant about if you don't have a healthy earth element and you have any kind of chronic disease in the body or the mind and the emotions, it will not heal unless the earth element heals. So it really is central. It's not just a digestion of experience in integration as a practice, but as the center of all the elements. Um, okay, I want to just touch on one thing. If you notice that you are reactive in life, if you notice that you worry a lot, if you notice that you feel stressed out and like you're burnt out, um, that is often a byproduct of undigested experiences that haven't landed yet as integrity and wisdom in the body. We have to pause because when you have conversations, conflicts, intimacy, grief, success, insights, if you don't pause to integrate those experiences and to assimilate them, you can't find a steady rhythm. And that then manifests as stress or burnout or overwhelm. So the earth element is so important. And part of the reason that we don't have healthy earth elements in Western culture is because the culture itself does not value pausing, slowing down, integrating, waiting, digesting. We live in a culture that pushes go, 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 bigger, faster, more, faster, bigger, go, hack it, sleep less, get up early. It's just, and we're taking that in all day, every day through media, which is snippets of more, get this, do that, go here, check that out. Your life's not cool enough. Look what that person, like, it's constant. And so for all of human history, we did not live this way, right? This is a recent modern it's a byproduct of modernity. And it's honestly, in the last 20 years, we've gone into hyperpsycho, right? So we have to cultivate that earth element, especially at this moment in human history, to find steadiness and rhythm and space. Okay, it's 9:02. Um, I'm just going to close with one question. And you can work with this question over the week, and with the follow-up email, I'll share a couple more little reflections or things to work with the earth element. And this is a really good moment in time right now to work with it in terms of the year, the cycle of the year. So the question is, if integrity is the fruit of digestion, what in you remains undigested, and how is it quietly shaping the way you love?
Can you
Okay.
say it
I did
again?
it in an hour. That's extraordinary. I don't think that's ever happened. Um, I'm going to stick around for a few minutes if anybody has any questions. And thank you, everybody, for joining, and happy Valentine's Day.
Colin, can you repeat what the question you just said?
Nada? Nobody?
Colin,
Um,
hey,
one thing I just wanted to say that just came to mind is that if I used to read a lot of books, and when I would finish those books, I would just move on to the next book. And then I realized after some years I wasn't actually integrating the material because somebody asked me a question about one of the books I read, and I was like, I can't remember anything from it. And so that's one place, I think finding one place in your life where you're not digesting and integrating, and then trying to bring mindfulness to that one place. You might find, so like if I read a book, I always take notes now. I go back, I read through it, I journal, like I actually digest the book before moving on to the next one. And I found that for me has helped strengthen that earth element, you know. Um, Somebody asked, uh, okay, can you share a tiny bit about the fire horse energy from this work? I understand the element of fire, but I don't know much about horse energy. Yes, I can. Um, Let me do this. All right. Um, Turn up your volume. Okay. Can you hear me now?
no, can you hear us?
No. Can you hear?
Okay.
I can hear. Okay, I can't hear anything. Why are people talking?
Yes.
Got it. Wait. Okay. Um, well, I'll just look at the comments because for some reason I can't hear. Um, we're moving out of this year of the snake. And to be totally honest, I have not spent a ton of time looking into Chinese astrology and those archetypal animals, the pig, the hare, the horse, etc. Yeah, I know a little bit about it, but it's just not an area I've spent a lot of time exploring. Um, but I understand it a little bit through the lens of the I Ching. And um, snake energy, of course, is what is in the unseen. It's about it's about shadow work, and it's about what connects us to the earth that we aren't acknowledging. It's about shedding. And so in Chinese astrology, in a year of a snake, there are the stages of the snake. And there's four stages of snake development. And the final stage is the shedding. So it's the snake is fully grown up, which one way of translating that is a person has moved through the stages of um, waking up, growing up, cleaning up. And the cleaning up stage is like doing shadow work, looking at the aspects of yourself you disapprove of, looking at the parts of yourself you deny, looking at the things you don't like about yourself, and really sitting with where does this come from? Is it introjected or conditioned content? Why do I believe this thing about myself? In other words, and really sitting with the shadow and sitting with the aspects of yourself that you haven't integrated. And then as you move out of the end of the snake year, it's about what am I shedding? And usually it's a belief. So it could be a belief or it could be a behavior that's a byproduct of that belief. Oftentimes addictions come out in shadow work. It could be an addiction to a thought. It could be to a limiting belief. It could be to an unhealthy relationship dynamic. It could be to your not pursuing something in life that has felt like a true calling. What holds you back? So, what are your limiting beliefs? So, as we look at the end of the year of the snake, it's what are you shedding? What are you letting go of? And if you don't shed or let go of that, really over the next 2 weeks, that energy in Taoism, the end of a cycle and the beginning of a cycle are so important because it's an Ouroboros or an Enso, right? Everything's a circle, everything's cyclical. At the end of a cycle, you can see what you're attached to because you don't want to let it go. At the beginning of a cycle, you can see your ambitions, you can see your desires and your attachments, right? So we can really see ourselves more clearly at the end and beginning of a cycle. Things come into high definition. So we are right now in this moment at the end of a cycle. So you have to look at what am I attached to? What wants to be let go of that I am not letting go of, and why? What am I afraid of? So it's working with fear. And then as we move into the year of the fire horse, fire is about connection, right? So we did the fire class last week. You can go back and reflect on that. Fire is about vulnerability, emotional openness, intimacy, sexuality, connection, human relatedness. It's about that which creates the spark of connection, but it can also be destructive if it's too big, right? When fire's too big, it's burnout, it's overdose, it's addiction, it is overbearing, overbearing. It will burn things up. In excess, fire destroys, right? It burns things to the ground. It decimates everything to ash. So, but when it's healthy, it's warm, it's connected, when it's got some earth element, right? Like we talked about today. So there's the fire aspect of the horse, and then there's the horse itself. Now, what does a horse represent for you in nature? I mean, literally, virility, vitality, creativity, um, uh, grandeur, nobility, strength, speed. Horses are very sensitive creatures. I had an ex-girlfriend who had horses, and we'd go hang out with her horses on the weekends, and she would say, "You're not listening to them," because they would like give me weird looks, and they wouldn't come up to me, and they were like really weird with me. And she was like, "You're not meeting them at their level. You're too loud in your mind." And I realized there's like this deep psychic thing going on with the horses where they're so sensitive. So as I got quieter inside and I would start to breathe slower, then the horses would come up and they would start to eat the apple out of my hand and connect with me. But they are very sensitive creatures, but they're also fucking strong and big. And like if you've ever, I've been bucked off a horse once, they are not joking around, right? So they represent that strength, but it's also the nobility of their strength. They carry their strength with nobility, right? They don't abuse their power, is another way of putting it. So if you combine this fire energy and spark and connection with the strength of a horse, this year there's going to be a lot of movement, big movement. If you've got a project, a vision, a dream, an aspiration, a wish, and you want to get some firepower behind it, this is the year to do the thing because you will be supported by those energies. If you carry all of this undigested, the things you don't want to deal with, the inconvenient things you won't let go of. If you carry the energy of the snake into the ear of the horse, all it's going to do is drag all of that vision and all of the dream and all of that fire and power. It will just drag it down and you won't be able to manifest it. So it's a really important transition. There's a transition from yin to yang. I'll leave it there. But there's some very good Chinese astrologers out there if you want like more extensive readings. And um, I'll see if I can find a resource to share in the email follow-up. Okay, I'll take one more question. Thank you, Renee. I want to ask if you could share more about your personal exploration of your primary element once you got into this work. To be more precise, what did you do on the practical side to connect with your element? I'm pretty aware that it's individual to each one, and from your years of experience, I'm curious where you would start with your exploration of your element and the other elements, knowing what you know now. Let me know if the question is clear. Okay. Yeah, so I'll kind of end on this. If you're learning a form, like maybe you practice yoga or you practice Tai Chi or Qigong or martial arts or something, for a long time, depending on the complexity of the form, you have to just learn the foundational muscle memory of like, how do you move? Like, okay, so your wrist rolls this way and it rolls this way, and this is a block, and this is what it means to separate heaven and earth, whatever the movements are. And it takes months, or in some cases years, just to learn the basic form. And you're just getting it into the physical muscle memory. And you're learning the biomechanics, and you're learning coordination, the physicality of it. Once you've committed it to memory, then you can start to explore the subtler movements of qi in the body. And you can start to sensitize yourself to the qi because you don't have to be in your mind thinking about the movement, right? And you can start to attune your breathing to the movement of qi or prana in the body. And then once the mind and the emotions and the body begin to align into one movement, and being and doing start to merge as one full movement, in that space, you can start to open up into deeper states of practice, right? And so these are stages from physical to mental, emotional, to them merging as one practice. Another way of putting it is in meditation, going from scattered mind, distractive, discursive mind, to unifying the mind and the breath, to having a unified mind, to then dropping mind altogether, and then opening into more states of oneness or non-dual states, and then being able to sustain states of openness for longer periods of time, and then to be able to sustain states of openness while you're doing the dishes and having a conversation and whatever, living life. So you see these things work in stages from superficial. It's not superficial, but it is, I'm using that term parochially. From grosser forms to subtler and subtler levels of practice. With the 5 elements, it's the same thing. So you learn, like in this class, we've been talking about general characteristics of the 5 elements, how to notice them in ourselves and in people around us in our lives, and some references to nature and seasonality. And like, first, what I would suggest for the next 6 months, A, meditate every day if you can. B, start to observe them in nature. Nature is the teacher. In this entire way of study, we remove dogma and we remove teachers. We go straight to the source, which is the natural Mother Earth, and let her teach. So start to observe in nature what's happening season by season, and then month by month. Start to notice what happens when the leaves start to become dry and contracted and the earth gets dry and the leaves fall from the trees and it creates spaciousness and you can see more. And there's that holy light of autumn and you can breathe, you feel your lungs open and you start to notice the grief of letting go. And you start to notice, what are you holding on to? What are you attached to? In the winter, start to notice what's happening in nature and how you're feeling fear or the need for resources or survival or safety or, death or depth. So really what we're learning is we're learning some concepts around the elements so that we can start to develop a language to communicate with nature. Because human beings are nature, the earth peopled. We are not separate in any way, and we're not separate from each other in any way. That's all in the mind. And so really what we're doing here is we're learning a language to start to communicate with nature and let in that wisdom and to start to break down the walls. And then we can start to move into deeper levels. But first, you can't, if you want to learn, Spanish or Bulgarian or Chinese, you can't just walk into some city in Shanghai and just start talking to people. You need to get some basic grammar down and some introductory words and to be able to open the conversation. So my recommendation would just be start observing nature, meditate every day, drink tea seasonally, join the seasonal tea club. This is not a sales pitch, but I do put a lot of energy and time into those and have for 8 years. Drink teas seasonally, work with some herbs seasonally, observe nature, meditate every day.